Okay, Madam Chair, we are now live. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brittany. Welcome, everybody. We will call this meeting to order at 1:02. Appreciate you all being here and our special guest as well from Huron-Kinloss, and we'll hear from him shortly. So you've had a chance to look at the agenda. Before we set about approving that, are there any additions or revisions? I wondered if we might, I don't see it here, but maybe under new business, I wonder if it's important for us to talk about the upcoming special council meeting on the 24th and how that will look, and a discussion about how we might elicit some information ahead of time in the form of a needs assessment for council members. So I would just ask that that be added under new business. I have a bit of an update from West Grey, a bit of good news, and I don't know if that comes under the CAO's report, possibly. We'll add that as well to new business. And if there's time only, I was hoping John would be here. John and I attended yesterday a webinar on implementing climate action plans, challenges, and successes through the university, or Brock University rather, and maybe some other of you folks also attended. If there's time, we can have a quick update on that, or I did take notes as usual, and I can alternately just circulate those. So with those, are there any other additions that you can think of at this point? I don't think I saw anyone's hand raised, so can I have someone to move that we approve the agenda with those revisions? Thank you, Anne. And all in favor? Sue, Sue's frozen. Okay, I think that passes. I'm not sure. Sue, are you still with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's just that your screen is completely frozen, but you're frozen in a very attractive pose, so nothing.
Oh, well, that's good, because usually it's not. I'm going to try turning video on and off. That might do the same as this morning. It kicked me right out of it. So if that's the case, I'll get on my iPad. So
perfect. Okay. Well, we can hear you just fine, Sue. So thank you. So as always, if there's any pecuniary interest to declare, you can do that now or at any point in time during the meeting. And item number 4 is approval of the minutes from our last meeting of February 26th. Is there any discussion or changes that you would like to see in terms of those minutes? If not, I would just ask that someone move to approve those minutes. Thank you, Danuta. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Okay, hopefully Sue's still with us. I'll just introduce Mike Fair, who's the Director of Community Services with the Municipality of Huron-Kinloss. Thank you very much, Mike, for being with us here today, and we're excited to hear about the progress that your municipality has had to date and sort of what the status of things are in terms of your climate action plan there. So welcome, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Oh my. Well, let's say without having a progressive council in place, we had like unanimous full support of our council, and without that, this likely couldn't have happened. Just to give you a little bit of a background, I'm actually Director of Community Services. So I look after parks, buildings, cemeteries, beaches, beach accesses, things like that. And but fortunately, I have a little bit of a background in my schooling was in environmental and resource management a long time ago. So at the end of the day, while looking after the facilities, the way I looked at it was that, you know, if I could make them more efficient through different energy programs throughout the years, we would. Because at the end of the day, it's a little self-serving. I live in here in Kinloss, so I'm trying to keep the tax dollars, make sure they're well at work, and so we try to make things efficient, so it's less tax dollars invested in operating the buildings if they're more efficient. And I guess at the end of the day, if there's one thing I can say is that there's two ways to look at this. One is climate change is here. It took a long time for a lot of people to actually buy into this, but it is changing. It's going to change, and in all honesty, I don't know that I'll actually live to see some of the more severe implications of climate change. But it's certainly for my children, for my child, and for my grandchildren. So that's kind of one reason why somebody might think, why would we invest in climate change? And so, but at the end of the day, what's happened now is through various reasons, technology is catching up to us. So it's a two-pronged thing. If you don't want to do it for your children and your grandchildren to live in a better world, you're going to do it because it's fiscally responsible to do it. If by investing in some of the energy conservation measures, making your buildings more efficient, those types of things actually it's in the best interest of the residents because they're the ones that pay the tax dollars to operate the buildings and streetlights and everything else. And the good thing is that I was always a business person first, and that it has to you got to have a return on investment. The problem is that in years past, right, if you didn't have a 3 to 7 year payback, odds are you might not have even considered the project. Well, some of these projects we're going to have to actually look through a different lens, and I think that instead of looking at that 3 to 7 year payback, we better start considering these 7 to 15 or 20 year paybacks. The payback is still there, but if it's better for, like, let's face it, when you're talking about geothermal or some of these other things, I always said down the road, if you invest in it, in a building that is going to be there for the next 30 years, well, it's a no-brainer. If I was buying a house off the hop or building a house, I think I'd be considering geothermal, because if I was planning on living there for 30 years, because the payback is there, and then they have grant money as well, which helps reduce that, those payback times is important as well. So instead of the streetlights, for example, I guess, I don't look after streetlights, but I recognize that the streetlight program through LAS and also the grant funding that was available there, it made made perfect sense to get the project done. Public Works was real busy, and I kept harping on everybody that they needed to get this done. And then finally, my CAO just turned to me one day and says, "Well, Mike, you're going to do it." All right. So we took a streetlight project. We updated the streetlights in the villages of Lucknow, Ripley, all the hamlets, the lakeshore. Maybe 700 or 800 streetlights in total, something like that. We did this back in 2014, and I, with the assistance of Public Works and drawing on finding some good people and some good places and establishing some good relationships, we actually we did the project. It cost us about the price tag was about 350,000. I think we got almost like a $150,000, $200,000 grant on the project at the time. It was through dumb luck. The grant actually, we were behind schedule on starting the project, and next thing you know, instead of getting like a 20% rebate, it went up to 35%, so which was significant. So that was, sometimes you just fall into these things. And at the end of the day, we did the street lights. We saved ourselves $50,000 a year in hydro. It was just by replacing 150-watt high-pressure sodium bulbs with 78-watt LED bulbs. They provided better light. They used, in most cases, they used at least half the consumption. And our maintenance costs went to nothing because we did the whole project at once. Now, at the end of the day, 20 years from 2014, 2015, what are we going to have to replace? And that is something that, I'm still encouraging my treasurer. I said, we need to start setting some money aside for these projects long term, so that, in another 15 years, let's say 10 years from now, we start setting aside, whether it's 20 or 30,000 a year, so that, it's not a big hit for the taxpayer on your capital plan. We try to keep our capital plans, I'll say, we try to flatline them. So we'll move projects back and forth in the budget, so that we're consistent with the amount of funding that we're looking for. So we don't end up with needing 1.5 million in one year and then 50,000 the next year. So if you can, through planning and through capital planning primarily, you can try to flatline that, so that you're consistent. You still have the funds available to operate and do the capital infrastructure from year to year. So that, and the payback on that, because of the grant, was, I think we were 5 years. We had borrowed from ourselves and paid ourselves off in 4.5 years. So that was a huge return, great investment, and the lights are fantastic. And in all honesty, strangely enough, you always think, try something new. We had little and no feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, from the residents. You would have thought, everybody hates change and stuff like that, but because we didn't go and get a design done, like, you could pay more money and get a lighting design done, but at the end of the day, we were switching out all existing lighting, and so we weren't going to redesign anything. It was a straight swap, replacing the arm and the head and the light. And it took them about 6 months. I won't lie to you, I don't know if you remember the winter of 2015. It was nasty, and those poor guys were out there switching out street lights, and I was like, that's crazy. But
I'm just going to go just quickly, Mike. I see our clerk's hand up, and I'm not sure what that means, but we'll go to Brittany just quickly here. Sorry for interrupting.
Thank you. No, thank you, Chair Coburn, and I apologize for interrupting Mr. Fair. I just wanted to take the time to ask a question, if I could, through you, Chair Coburn. So this committee has done a lot of discussions regarding, the generalized overarching work plan, being the climate initiatives work plan that this committee intends to develop, and how we can best involve the residents of the township of Georgian Bluffs? How do we get the community involved? So I was wondering if you could speak to Huron-Kinloss's experience in community engagement and ensuring that the overall community of Huron-Kinloss had a say in the township's priorities through the climate action planning process.
Thank you, Brittany. And if I may, I would just add maybe a precursor to that question, and that is, I think I heard Mike, you say that you have a progressive council. Was there some work done with council members in terms of awareness and education to get them to the point where they were wanting to invest in these kinds of changes? And if so, what did you find most helpful?
I guess, not realizing it at the time, but I was educating the council every time we bring a project forward. A lot of our renovation projects or our upgrades, we always had an efficiency component to it. So, so our council was always aware that, we looked at everything. We replaced windows, energy efficient windows, insulation, stuff like that. It was all had an efficiency lens at some point through any of those projects. So that was kind of the education and the precursor to the next step when we started to look at doing a climate change and energy plan. So just a little bit of a background. We do have some long-standing councillors, and our mayor was actually the chairperson of the Great Lakes Cities Initiative, GLCI. Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. So it was all the mayors that were on the shores of the Great Lakes or the St. Lawrence. They were looking at, trying to protect the water and addressing some of the climate change issues that might be coming forward. So he was involved. He was actually the chairperson at one point of that group. And it just through, I guess, connections and or initiatives, he was invited to the Paris Accord in 2009. So he was invited there to speak about what the work that we're doing around the Great Lakes and the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Initiative. And so that's part of the background to why it was so easy for our council to buy into a climate change energy plan. Just another background precursor, because he came back and he said, Mike, we gotta look at the GHG emissions, because climate change is here, and with the signing of the Paris Accord, it was around the world, and then there's I think it was like a turning point, and at that point he was also introduced to the Global Covenant of Mayors, which is another organization that basically is there are supporters at the municipal level for climate change and trying to provide assistance, guidance to municipalities around the world, or cities, towns around the world, in regards to climate mitigation and adaptation. So those are kind of the precursors to. So when we brought forward about the climate change energy plan, my selling feature is that it's going to be some work. It's a short-term pain for long-term gain, and right now, when it comes to it was it was the right thing to do, because you look at everything you do through a climate change lens, whether it's developing policy on drainage or subdivision development, things like that. But at the end of the day, it was about the climate change energy plan was going to, we hope or we anticipate, will provide leverage when it comes to funding availability in the next few years. Because right now, I think, does it change with governments, as in provincial and federal, whether it's liberal, conservative, on what their mandates are and what their, how they view climate change and, what policies are they going to put into place. But right now, there seems to be a push on environmental initiatives to really go after this GHG emissions and achieving some of those goals. And the feds are certainly on board right now. The province, yeah, not so much. And it was strange. So we made our application through FCM, through the MSIP program. So we made the application to them, and we also made an application to MEP, which is the provincial program. That was, so we'd made the application, we received the funding for MSIP to the tune of $72,000, I think was the grant. And it covered our whole, all of our fees for the project, except for staff time, of course. And the other end of it was MEP. We're initially, what happened was right around the election, and then Ford canned the MEP program, said, yep, no funding. And then for whatever reason, and I don't know why, 3 months later, we got a call from MEP. Oh yeah, we approved your grant. And I was like, great. So the MEP grant was geared towards what they call it energy mapping. Energy mapping, that's what that particular, it was like a $25,000, $30,000 grant. And in all honesty, the energy mapping was a useless process for us. And I didn't know, you don't know until you kind of go through a process and you go, did it work? And the energy mapping, what the result was, is that, yeah, in the Point Clark and the Ripley and Lucknow, yeah, there's more energy used there. Those are the hamlets. But it really couldn't identify, it's not like you could take and say, well, this neighborhood in particular was a high concentration of energy use, and this neighborhood was very efficient. It really didn't tell you that. It couldn't get that because we're a lot of rural postal codes. So, Point Clark, half of Point Clark could be one postal code. So it didn't tell us anything. And until you get into larger urban centers, you can see where, okay, well, these are, if you go down into, let's say, Windsor, you go to some pockets of Toronto or larger areas, you can see clearly where the high energy use is in some of those neighborhoods because they're older homes, no or little insulation, old windows, so that is the benefit of energy mapping, but I didn't understand it until we did it and how useless it was for us. So I wouldn't recommend doing it from a rural perspective with small hamlets.
Sorry, Mike, I just want some terminology clarified. Energy mapping, that's a new term for me. Is that the same as an energy audit? No. An energy audit is really easy at the corporate level. You're doing it now.
by law, you have to be, or sorry, energy inventory. You are doing now. You have to. Every municipality has to submit the energy that they consume to the province every year. That's legislation. The energy mapping is kind of where it's you have to. Our consultant basically through us, we had to read just a letter of authorization that they could get. For us, we're Westario Hydro and Hydro One. They're two LDCs. So they would go and pull the energy consumption from all our residents through those two LDCs. But they can only go as low as the postal codes when it comes to granularity. That's as fine as they can get it. So it just, energy mapping just is more about neighborhoods and subdivisions and communities, about where your high energy users are. So for us, it didn't make sense.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I just don't want to lose Brittany's question also regarding how to engage our communities and the public and stakeholders.
Right. So we reached out, like we have good relationships with public health, the conservation authorities. We reached out to I would include try to find some agricultural representation. Now is it which municipality again?
We're part of Grey County.
Part of Grey County.
Mm-hmm.
What is your agricultural up there?
I'm not sure of the percentage. Brittany might know, but I would say it's significant in Georgian Bluffs. Yeah, and for sure we would want the agricultural community represented with the planning 100%.
Yeah, and so what I did is actually, we're a small municipality. We're only 7,000 residents. So, I actually went out and solicited because, you advertise, you put the word out there, and you get nobody. So I actually made some phone calls. Turns out I played hockey with a couple of guys in a tournament, and so you get to know people, and so you find those people who are, and we actually went after younger, like in our area, it's dairy, chicken, turkey, cash crop. Those are the big agricultural businesses in our community. So I went out and got a dairy, chicken, a cash crop, and another one which was kind of a mix. But it was like, so we wanted to have a little bit of even a mix on the agricultural sector. And then of course, but we didn't go out to the, we didn't put an advertisement out to the general public. We were very selective on for who we wanted on this climate action committee, because it was a process. It was a long process. The key stakeholders, I think, are public health. They need to be at the table. They're going to give you a lens. The conservation authorities, you need to have them at the table. They're going to give you a great lens, especially on the adaptation and mitigation. But at the other end of it is and they weren't there at every meeting, but my CAO, our clerk, our treasurer, not so much, because we had good representation everywhere else. I also had the public works superintendent, who also looks after like roads, drainage, all that stuff. And then I also had our chief building official, Matt, and he was key too, because he just because he's got a diverse background, he provided a great lens too, because you're still talking about subdivision development, and those kind of things do impact on climate change dramatically down the road. But we didn't go into advertising to the general public to garner representation from Joe Blow off the street.
Mhm.
Mind you, if you don't know who your climate change champion if there is a climate change champion in your community, and you know who they are, I would say engage them, for sure.
That's good. That's good. Good advice, for sure. I would think our planner at the office would be an important one to include as well. Mike, do you agree?
I agree 100%, because that's the same thing. It's our clerk and our building official. They're involved in a lot of our planning, all those planning applications. Those are the two that are comment, and they're the ones that are responsible for the policy development wrapped around subdivision development and all that stuff. So your planning, yeah, for sure, have them involved.
Excellent. Good to know. I wonder if now, if you don't mind, Mike, can I just open it up to questions from the other folks on the committee here? That's okay with you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, Luke, go for it.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, I think, Mike, this is Luke, and very useful to hear your story and how much of and how strategic it's been. I have a question about you're talking about involving a lot of people in the public, and we are still a few steps behind you. And I also took your point about this is all about return on investment. And my question is the following: if you talk about a particular project, for example, the streetlight project, the return on investment is relatively straightforward to calculate, right? You actually know what it's going to cost, you know approximately what you're going to say, you have a clear business case. Now we are at a point where we are suggesting to council that we start this whole process of a climate action plan, and we're asking for, or staff is asking for a budget to start that process. And therefore, it is a little bit more difficult to say, well, if you commit to a budget of X thousand per year over a period of time, it's going to yield a return on investment of X%, or we're going to get it back over seven or 10 years. So I'm wondering how, if there has been a discussion that you had to go through to basically buy into the whole concept of climate change without clearly being able to make a tangible business case where council says, well, we can actually see it, right? Because at the moment, the reality is that some people will say, well, how much is it going to save us on the long term? And we will not be able to say, well, return on investment is 7, in 7 years we get it back. And therefore, you deal with competing interests, you deal with different levels of understanding how important this actually is. So I wonder if you can share, if you have gone through this process, if you had to deal with people that are kind of sitting on the fence and basically say, well, we can only spend a dollar once. I'm not so sure about this climate change business. And you can't really give me a great answer on return on investment other than to say, well, you had this great quote about, you either spend it, it's a little bit of short-term pain for long-term gain. To some people that may resonate, other people may say, well, let's wait and see. So how did you deal with these dynamics?
Okay, I was lucky, and that I likely laid down about, I've been with the same municipality for almost 26 years. We have, some of our council members have been on council, some of them were likely 20 years or more. So I think part of it was, like I said, all the projects that we did, and throughout all those years, I always looked at an efficiency and a payback. So this is the one. It's a project that you really got to think outside the box and think on what the payback is. But when you start looking at forget the one big thing is you're going to really through the MSIP program, you're going to. Now, I highly recommend you joining the MSIP program, the Partners for Climate Protection through FCM. Like that is a no-brainer. But at the end of the day, and then doing the climate change plan along with that, you're going to, and don't just try to do. We took a chunk. And some people will just say, well, we're just going to try and achieve just doing the inventory. Well, the inventory you should, I would suspect, on your energy consumption, you should have most of it now. And because you're reporting it to some agency already somewhere. And when it comes down to setting your, I guess I'll go. I'm going to get. I don't want to get distracted. I'll come back to the question of if you. So many times you develop a plan and it's and it sits on a shelf. But part of this plan, when you look at other people's plans, you look at what were some of the outcomes. And when you look at the outcomes in some of these other plans and say, okay, well, they actually changed the way they do recycling. They changed the way they operate their landfill. They changed the way they do drainage or subdivision development and some of those other things that you think, because climate change isn't just about reducing your greenhouse gas emissions. It's about mitigation for long-term climate change implications. For example, we look at it now, there's times that we might get 6 inches of rain in a pocket in an area in our municipality. We'll get 6 inches of rain in a period of 2 hours. I might have went 40 years of my life and never actually witnessed this. But now I've likely witnessed it 3 times in the last 10 years. So how do you change? So part of the climate change is not just about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's about your drainage, your municipal drains, your farm drainage systems. That's critical to get the agricultural sector involved. Your subdivision drainage systems. Are they built for the 100-year flood or because what used to be termed the 100-year flood, those terms are almost like 25 years ago. The terms that they used, well, those terms are irrelevant now. And so that is it's like the benefits from different sectors within your municipality. That's going to be, and that's where you need the planning, Saugeen Valley, the health unit, all these things involved in your developing your plan, because you need people to really look inside and say, how can we change the way we're doing business? And that's the benefit. Because if you build whether it's, I guess it's, let's say you build a drain because this is the way we build the drain, and this is where we're going to drain. Well, maybe if you looked at it from a climate change lens, maybe you might do something differently. So instead of building this now, and then in 10 years it fails because we didn't think far enough ahead, understanding what the impacts or what the implications of the climate change, how the weather patterns change and stuff like that, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
Okay.
thank you. The question, but if you, I don't know, Mike, if you have any kind of suggestions or insights you could share in terms of, so you're very clear in terms of the business case is very much about return on investment and basically forward-looking perspective, right? This is not about being an environmentalist, so to speak, but really about it's coming down the pike. You better be prepared, and you do it from a landfill perspective, from a drainage perspective, from a subdivision, all that kind of stuff. Do you also have some pointers then in terms of people that say, well, but you know, this is all, maybe there is not, maybe it needs to be demonstrated if this actually is paying off on the long term. Why don't we take the hit rather than invest up front? Why don't we take the hit when we're confronted with those situations, if they ever exist? Because there will always be some skeptics, right? And it's just like, are there any ways in terms of the arguments that you felt were effective in having a constructive discussion with people that are more skeptical, or they say, you know, it's just, we recognize it's important, it's just not the highest priority. We'd rather spend our dollars differently.
100%. And that's where the cost to do a climate change plan is a drop in the bucket compared to the cost of not doing it. Irregardless if you get grant funding, because it's, you know, I'm anticipating that grants and funds will become more available to those municipalities that actually have a climate change plan and are prepared to and have changed some of their policies and stuff. But if you're doing, sometimes some of these solutions cost a lot of money, and there might be funding available if you have a climate change plan. Because if you don't have a climate change plan, now you're, well, put it this way, you're likely behind a lot of other municipalities that do have climate change plans, and there's a lot, I would say, are moving on them now. So I say the upfront cost, if you can do it for, you know, if it's $100,000, at the end of the day, that might save you $1 million down the road. Mm-hmm. When you talk about municipal infrastructure and other, I guess what the impacts of the climate change plan are, it's just not about saving electricity or natural gas, or it's about mitigation infrastructure as well.
Thank you, that's helpful. I found your comments about building the partnerships, Mike, to be particularly helpful and who to include in that. So thank you for that. Other questions? And welcome to Al and John. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you could make it. Anne, we'll go to you next.
Yes, thank you very much for this, Mike. My question is related to the partnership that you established with public health. And I'm trying to think of kind of how they fit. And I know they certainly fit from the perspective of wells and septic systems. What other kind of input would they be bringing?
With the climate change, I guess it's the health issues that are going to come with climate change. When we talk about, you know, you can imagine if you're an elderly person you're still living at home, and you need air conditioning in the summer because the average temperature now, or the heat waves are now more frequent. And maybe in the winter, as much as everyone says, well, the winters are mild because it's climate change. Well, everything seems to be extremes anymore. Like, who would have thought that people in Texas, that's kind of like, they didn't winterize a nuclear station in Texas. It wasn't winterized. Like, some of their infrastructure has likely been there forever. So if somebody says climate change is not here, I'm thinking, I don't know how you can say it's not here.
Yeah, there seems to be all kinds of evidence for sure. And if I may, given that that's my former career, public health has a particular, I'm not going to call it a division, but they have a group or a project that is about climate action. And I know Andy Barton is the manager who has been in charge of that. I don't know if he remains in that position at this point, but so it's about safety and it's about health. It's about vector-borne diseases like Lyme disease and West Nile virus. And as I say, it's about evacuation whenever there's flooding at our river basins, and all of that has to do with public health, because public health is the health of populations and communities. It's a broader sort of mandate, so it fits really well with public health, I think, and that's great advice. I think I saw someone else's hand up. Now I've forgotten. Was there another question for Mike? Any other? Okay, let's go to Bob.
Hi, Mike. What about your invasive species? Is that climate change is driving that big time too? I just remember our times with Phragmites down there, and you probably still got it. Got a big smile on your face there.
Oh, you Bob Gray.
Yeah.
Did you used to work for the M&R? Or?
Yeah, I did in another lifetime. I did. Yep.
No, we worked together on projects.
We sure did.
Oh, for God's sakes. I recognize you now, Bob. Sorry.
It's all right.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so climate change is driving some of the invasive species problems that we're having, which cost a lot of money too.
Yeah. So, and this is Phragmites is a perfect example of climate change. For example, has Phragmites likely been around? It's been around for a lot longer than the last 20 years I've been dealing with it. But what happened on Lake Huron on our coast is that, and the Great Lakes are on a 30-year cycle. From high level to low level, back to high level, it's a 30-year cycle. And you can look back to 1918 and you can see all the water levels for the last, it's uncanny what the 30-year cycle looks like. But this last 30-year cycle, the lake level went down quickly, and from a high in 94 or something like that, and it went down, it went real down quickly and was down. We have never seen Lake Huron this low for this long, up until 2015. So the lake went down, it went down low, and then it stayed there. It's not like the lake levels traditionally just step down, step down, step down, and then they step up. But it dropped, and everybody said, it was because of they overdredged the St. Clair. It was because the Americans are taking all the water. And it was because the aliens were coming at night, and they were taking the water back to their planet. I've heard it all. Because it couldn't possibly be climate change. And that's what they're suggesting with our lake levels, is that the cycles are going to be there, but the cycles could be shorter. So, lake levels could rise, like from 2012 was the lowest the lake has been in the last 100 years. And then it went to record high levels in 2019. Like the 2 years, the lake rose like 3 feet, Lake Huron. So and because the lake levels were so low for so long, Phragmites, invasive species, it had a heyday. It just went rampant, and didn't know what to do with it. And algae was growing like Point Clark, we have a huge rock shoal at Point Clark. It's like 1,000 acres out there underwater that's really shallow. What's a prime location to grow algae? Well, because of the zebra mussels cleaning out the lake, and because the lake level was so low for so long, we were getting algae wash-ups that were 3 feet deep, and they were, 20 meters wide. Like, it was like somebody took a forage harvester or a hay wagon down there and literally, like, not just one hay wagon, they took 20 hay wagons down there and threw all the hay off onto the beach. It was just unbelievable. And then, we were getting algae, lots of algae growth. Right now, we don't really get algae anymore because now the lake level is so high, the light doesn't get down to the rock, the bottom of the lake to help grow the algae. That's where it starts growing, is on the rock shoal, and then we get a storm, it releases and washes the shore. So, does climate change affecting invasive species? Yes, it's affecting the dynamics in the lake because everyone was blaming the algae on, oh, it must be the farmers. They're polluting. The farmers are polluting the lakes. They're putting on way too much fertilizer. They're spreading way too much manure. I don't know if anybody on your council is a farmer, if anybody knows too many farmers right now, but I'd tell you right now, manure is cash. So if I can put on, 5 pounds, and I'm going to get this much yield out of my crop, and if I put 10 pounds on, I'm not going to get any increase in my yield. Why would I put 10 pounds on? I would sell it to somebody else so that they could increase their yield to a certain level. But this is the idea is that farmers are, are there irresponsible farmers likely out there? Yeah, there's still some out there. But you know what? Odds are they're not going to be in business long if they are. The reason being is they're businessmen. And manure and fertilizer is money. It's cash. And that's why, we've had issues in the past where, the local beach association is blaming, the farmers inland for contaminating all their nearshore water. So it's, it's certain amount will impact it, but at the end of the day, they're not most of them are good practicing farmers. But it's climate change.
Yeah.
That's why the algae was growing. So.
Yeah. And when you talk about things like the algae and Phragmites, I think is what Bob called it. I'm going to have to look that one up. I think what it comes down to is that we're asking people to change their mindset. So where people get used to the status quo, and that tends to be more reactive. So now we've got lots of storm water. What are we going to do about it now because it's rushing down the road? Or what do we do about the algae buildup? We're now asking people to be proactive and to think about what we can do to not just adapt anymore, but to mitigate. And I think that can be a bit of a challenge because the easy road is always the status quo. It's not doing something differently. Other questions for Mike while we've got him here? I'm just finding this to be really valuable because these are examples that are our neighbors. So when we take this back to council and our community and our staff, this is not about us being, the weirdos of Grey County. We are catching up a little bit. We're trying to keep pace, and it's nice to be able to say this is what Huron-Kinloss is doing. Here's what Grey Highlands is doing, and because we tend to be a little insulated or isolated in our own community and our own mindset, and we forget to look beyond our own borders. Other questions for Mike?
I have a question for the committee. What population are you serving?
Just under 11,000.
Okay, so everyone says, well, you know what, instead of us just as our own municipality doing it, why don't we get 8 municipalities to do it? And then if you had 8 municipalities, you could, you could do but one of those things, this is a project, bigger is not necessarily better when it comes to partnerships. You might look at a neighboring municipality at best. In hindsight, well, two things, we likely could have maybe looked at a municipality to the south of us. But we didn't. We kind of went on our own because we're, at the end of the day, I wasn't going to go through the effort of trying to convince another council to buy into a process that our council was very committed to. So that was part of it. You could do it, but I wouldn't say 11,000. I'd say you're don't try to make it. Get the key players involved. The health unit, conservation authorities, and your staff. The staff have to buy in. Sorry, Brittany.
I think Brittany is the converted. I'm gonna make that assumption. So I think those are key points, and we don't want it to be unwieldy in the beginning by trying to involve every single person in our municipality until we have kind of a solid plan going forward, and that makes total sense to me. Any other questions or remarks, John?
Hi, sorry to join late, but just one question for Mike. And the degree to which you were able to have community outreach and community involvement in that, can you just speak to me on that for a bit?
We did make a great effort to go out and garner support from, involve the public, the general public. We didn't. At the end of the day, if you have a champion, an environmental champion within your community, great, bring them on board. It's nice to have for lack of a better word, somebody that's keen. But more importantly, it's the decision makers and the policy makers. Like we had one counselor on our committee too. Lillian was great. She was supportive. So that was good. If you've got a couple of counselors that are certainly, if they're keen, great. But your policymakers are your facility staff, your community services people. I don't know how your structure's organized there, but those facility people need to be, because at the end of the day, it's still about energy too, and greenhouse gas emissions, and reducing what you're using in natural gas and stuff like that. But that's, John, is the key, is that I wouldn't put a lot of effort into going out into the community to get them to sit on your committee. Because if you make your committee too big, do you know what happens? It will die a slow, agonizing death, and you will start putting pencils in your own eye. It's god awful.
I have no more room in my eyes for more pencils at this point.
Well, that is a very good advice. We're new to this, and that's something we will pay attention to. Thanks for that.
Okay.
Other questions for Mike? I know we're getting the biggest bang for our buck here because it's been so helpful. I'm not seeing any hands in the air at the moment. Mike, thank you so much for your time to come and talk to us today. That is invaluable information, and it's coming from practically next door, and that makes it even more valuable. So hopefully we can reach out as needed if we have a question or two down the road. Would you be willing?
For sure. I think Brittany, I've sent you did I send you some documents and stuff?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good. And if you're looking for anything else, the only other thing I can say is we used ICLEI. And if you can engage ICLEI, get them. If you have to wait, 6 months, wait. All I can say is they really are the pros. They will, and they're efficient, and they're no nonsense, and they will lead you, they will walk you through it. They lead you through it.
That's perfect. That's on the plan, I believe. I think Al's and Brittany have that on the plan, both PCP and ICLEI. And it's nice to hear that you're confirming that those are the groups that are going to be most helpful.
I can't say enough because I'm one person, right? And so now I'm one person. So we have our plan. Our plan is approved by council. So I'm actually taking a report to council in April, and so now it's about implementing the plan. So but every time somebody makes a decision, whether it's public works or whatever, hopefully they always have the climate change lens in the back of their head making these decisions. But it's about our next step. Our next step is trying to Brittany, make note of this. Your consultants, make sure they set you up with your templates, because you need to inform your community about everything, all the benefits that they can do or can take advantage of. For example, it might be a grant program through Natural Resources Canada or through Save on Energy, through IESO. Those are the things that you can pass on to your residents. And then there's the low bearing fruit, like you walk into some people's homes and they still have a incandescent light bulb. I don't even know if you can still buy them, but things like that to try and help the residents make good decisions about what they can do in their home. And sometimes it's little or no cost. And there's programs out there. Toronto's actually likely, I don't like to say things about Toronto, but they've got a good program. It's for low income. So what they'll do is they'll loan you the money. You can, let's say you want to replace all the windows, insulate your home, and it's going to cost $30,000. So they'll
Has everyone else lost the volume here, or is it just me? Sorry,
Yeah,
Mike, we lost your volume somehow. You went mute. Is it on your headset?
It's probably City of Toronto cut him off.
Yeah,
Karma.
right on. Yeah, they did.
Talk quietly amongst yourselves, I think is what the teacher would say, right? Are you back with us? Yep, got you now. Perfect.
Okay. So this is the talking about City of Toronto. So what they did is they set up, it's like a low interest loan. I think the program is kind of like for people who can't afford to do renovations to their home to make it more efficient. So it's a program, and it's a bit of a stretch because it's going to take resources to manage that. But so then it's tied to the house, so that when somebody purchases that house from them down the road, they also purchase that loan that goes with the property. It's tied to the property somehow. It's little things like that, because you know what? Can I afford to upgrade and put in let's say I want to put in a heat pump. Could I do it? Yeah, I'd save my pennies and I would get it done in the next year or two. But there's some people that own homes that, you know what? They could try to save until the cows come home, and they may never be able to afford to upgrade that home, but yet their hydro bill is still, $600 a month because they live in a drafty house that was built in 1920. It's those kind of things that we're trying to push to the community, trying to give them the tools to help them hopefully save money. I often say it's about we want to keep here in Kinloss dollars in here in Kinloss. So
Yeah, exactly.
there's other things like that, but that's what I was saying, Brittany, about getting some of the templates and tools that, so once a month you can put out in your newsletter that here's a little tidbit, you know, like
Earlier this year, our acting CAO at the time put out a resource for homeowners on how to protect your house from flooding, which certainly falls under the adaptation category, not so much mitigation, but it's using that opportunity that we're already doing a mail out to send out that information to help people help themselves. Exactly. Any other questions for Mike? Bob, or sorry, Luke, was your hand up? No? Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Mike, for coming. We really, really appreciate your time and your expertise and sharing your experience with us. I think hopefully somebody's been taking lots and lots of notes so that we have this to refer back to. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. And Brittany, if the time comes and you need something else, if I can give it, I will. It's all about sharing, and because in all honesty, none of us in the small municipalities, it's not like we can hire 3 or 4 people to go and do this job in regards to climate change. That's not feasible. But it's how we can help each other amongst municipalities, that we can work together and share resources and tools. And God bless Toronto, they just said all the marketing literature that they just developed, they are willing to share it with any municipality. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
The days 20 years ago, no way.
Well, hopefully people recognize that climate change is a global problem and it's not specific to, or it doesn't respect borders. So we might as well be sharing resources and working together. So Thank you very much, Mike. And hopefully we see you back here again and we can show off our new climate action plan to you.
110%. All right. Good luck. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
All right. Excellent. That was really helpful, I thought. Yeah. All right. I guess moving on with our agenda then, Brittany. I don't see anything under correspondence unless you have something that's come in. No, nothing under staff reports, or no? And no public questions probably. Okay, perfect. So moving on to number 9, unfinished business. And we have that as a standing item, and that's our work plan for the committee. And I see, Luke, that you distributed an updated version of that. So do you want to give us just a high-level review of what's been updated or what's different on that plan?
Thanks. There's a few pieces that came out of last. First of all, apologies for sending it late, and I will really step up here, and I would like to commit to doing it basically just after the meeting so that we have it. I inserted a few bits and pieces related to the decisions we came to last meeting. First is to, and I think this one, and I apologize, this one is still the old one. What I submitted later, and I will provide you with an update this afternoon. I included, so the municipal vision came later, and so in the revised version that we don't have here, we said that the vision and goals will be pushed out a little bit until we have actually commitment from the council towards a climate action plan. And what I put forward as a result of last week's meetings is really kind of the content of the memo that staff sent to council in terms of having a meeting with the council next week or the week after, and also to goes back to your agenda point, Kathy, in terms of what are the ways by which we can engage with council members about some of the concerns they may have leading up to the decision to provide funding. So those are the two main milestones, and the rest kind of remain the same. But I will continue. Next time you will have an updated one based on discussions we've had during this meeting.
Perfect. That sounds excellent. It's nice to have that that check-in point to see where our progress is and what where we're moving towards. Does anyone have any questions for Luke about that work plan at this point? Okay. Thank you, Luke. And then moving on to new business, I think probably it's most important that we talk about the special council meeting on the 24th. And I wonder if Al might be able to speak to that. But I think one of the questions that we may have, Al, is do we solicit some information or feedback from council now, get their questions, try to get a handle on where some of the knowledge deficits are or what they think might be some of the challenges or barriers ahead of time in the form of a survey or just some kind of general email so that we can help you and the rest of us prepare for that meeting. Does that make any sense?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it makes a lot of sense. We can certainly send something out to council well in advance and ask them to perhaps put some questions on an email back to us. The clerk can certainly capture all of those, and then the committee could be prepared to answer those questions in advance of the council meeting. I would suspect that what typically will happen is we won't get a lot of questions in advance. They're going to be looking for us to sort of share some vision and some ideas, and then that will perhaps trigger some questions, but we can certainly ask if there's any questions in advance for sure.
Thank you. And thanks for your work on that, to be anticipated as well, Brittany. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about that upcoming special meeting? Do we want to talk more about a specific agenda, or who will be sort of leading the charge there? I'm assuming Al's going to be, but I might be assuming incorrectly. Brittany.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to note, further to your comments, Council did move forward with the recommendation that we host this special council meeting to host a type of joint session between yourselves and council prior to the budgetary meeting, which has been scheduled for March 24th at 5 o'clock. I have not yet circulated that to yourselves. I will do so following discussions today, just as a note.
Thank you. So we have confirmation that as many council members as possible can be there then, sounds like. Perfect. And that'll be an open meeting, so I imagine we can go ahead and promote that to the public and other groups who might be interested in listening in. Al?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brittany, would that be the opportunity when you send out the email to perhaps canvass councillors if they've got questions in advance of the meeting to forward them to you so that we can share them amongst the committee?
Absolutely.
That sounds good. Thank you. And Anne?
Yeah, I wonder whether the email could have some kinds of questions that could generate questions. Because I think if we're just doing kind of a, do you have any questions question, if they haven't thought about it much, it's not going to generate very much. Whereas if we could ask some questions around, I'm talking or thinking off the top of my head, but do you have any questions around adaptation, mitigation, nature-based solutions, you name it, whether that might be more likely to generate some questions from them.
Brittany?
Thank you. And if I may just rely upon your expertise, if anyone has any specific questions that they feel should be relayed to the council members, please feel free to forward them along to myself and I will include them in the email. With respect to timelines, we should do this sooner than later, given that the 24th is not that far away, and the agenda will need to be published to the township website on the 19th. So I would suggest that you have any questions submitted to myself over the duration of this weekend for formal circulation on the 15th, please and thank you.
Okay, so if we can all commit to do that, or some of us, if you have some suggestions for Brittany, that would make her job easier. Go ahead, Danuta. I think you're still on mute, maybe.
Yes, sorry. I'm sitting too far. I was just wondering if you wanted to have anyone vet those questions, or otherwise where I'll send things to Brittany, and I suppose, or Brittany, you could filter them, whichever you prefer that way. I'm feeling like I want to hear what they think about climate change, or perhaps what is the thing that concerns you the most about climate change is the kind of question that I would ask, because I really want to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we can address their questions as well if we don't know what it is that's concerning them. And I think that's a safe environment to ask that question to, rather than asking people to say it out loud during a videotaped meeting. So I think that's a respectful question that'll get us, I think, thinking on the right tracks and preparing better to answer their questions. Is it okay if we all send them to you then, Brittany, and you can sift through them, or do you want someone to vet them first?
Yes, I mean, feel free to send them to myself, and between Al and myself, I mean, you'll recall that we've prepared that quite extensive report as well for council's consideration. So between Al and myself, we'll pull something together that we feel accurately is reflective of questions that need to be addressed, and forward them. So I'm happy to do that on behalf of the committee.
Thank you. And I think John has added a couple of sample questions to the chat forum as well that I'm sure can be captured too. So thank you, John. Luke.
Thank you. Yeah, my point would be there's a number of questions, but I'm just reflecting on the presentation that John did, and there weren't too many questions following his presentation. And I'm also reflecting on the meeting of the council of the meeting of the whole of last Wednesday, where, you know, and I was particularly interested in the trail discussion, Campbell Mountain. And I wonder, of course, some of these things are quite, there's emotions involved. And I was just wondering if there is a very safe space to have council members express their concerns that are kind of the elephants in the room. And we know probably, or you as council members and staff know much better what the interests are of the interests of different council members are. But I wonder if there's a way by which we can put these things on, that there's a safe space where the councillors can put it on the table and say, I just don't get it, or I don't think it's important, or other things are more important. And that there is a way by which these things can be addressed from a kind of demystified a little bit. And I thought the discussion we just had was just super helpful in terms of looking at efficiency, being this, you know, and to basically demystify that this is all about a bunch of people that are soft and fuzzy and environmentalists, but to really see and to have that discussion and to tease it out and to say, this is in many ways common sense and we can actually back it up. But how do you create that venue? How do you create that space that is really kind of honest and where things are not left unspoken? Because I think if we don't address some of the underlying concerns and fears that some council members may have, maybe not, but maybe they have, then we never get over that tipping point of a buy-in, and then basically there's a reluctance, or people feel they're pushed into a corner without really understanding what this is all about. And I think for the long-term cohesion of the council, we can still agree to disagree, but at least can we have a venue where these underlying thoughts and feelings are addressed, so that we are at least aware of them? Because my sense is, as long as everybody feels that there is still something that ultimately they were pushed in a corner or they weren't listened to, then I think on the long term, it's just not the most constructive way of moving forward. Anyway, it's more a comment than anything else. But I just feel that we still have a bit of work to do. And yeah, in whatever way we can be helpful to Al and the council, to the committee, basically, who's going to lead this, I think, yeah, the better it is. That's all.
I agree. And thank you, Luke, for those comments. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's when we say climate change, it's still a mystical creature for a lot of people. And you're right, the way Mike described it in very practical terms and addressing the low-hanging fruit, pointing out the things that we've already done and have in place, but that we need to do more. I think those are all good ways of approaching it. Anne?
Yeah, I really agree with what Luke started there in terms of needing to create a safe space for this conversation. And I don't always like the idea of council going into camera, but I do know that council can go into camera for educational purposes. And I wonder whether the part of this meeting could be deemed educational and allow that conversation and that sharing of information to happen in a safe way.
I'm of two minds on that one, because first of all, it will exclude all of you. But I'm going to let Al take a stab at that question.
So are we not a committee of council? So couldn't we be included?
I'm going to let Brittany answer that question. Thank you, Brittany.
So my clerk alarm bells are kind of going off here. I would say it is the responsibility of our politicians to be open and transparent. And, they've kind of taken on that responsibility to say what may not be most popular in an open session of council, so that the community is fully aware of the discussions that are happening. I would suggest that we do not entertain hosting any of these discussions in closed session.
I agree, and I see our deputy mayor nodding as well. I think when it's a formal training that's specific to the skills or the duties of council, then it falls under that open session exemption or exception rule, but I'm not sure that this one would. But I think your point is well taken, Anne. We do want it to be comfortable and safe and allow people to express those concerns in order to alleviate them so we can move forward with that. Al, did you have anything more to add there?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would only say the following. I think you're going to get the most sort of involvement with council members. I don't think you're going to have anyone openly say they're anti-climate action or that they don't believe that climate is important. But I think where you're going to get a lot of discussion is convincing them that $150,000 over the next 3 years is required. And I think we're going to have to put sort of that return on that investment on the table, so that, it's no secret to council members that this is going to be a tough budget year. You've got COVID overhanging a bunch of really budgetary challenges that are forthcoming, and this simply adds to that pressure. And I think you will have some council members that will need to be convinced that $50,000 in 2021 for this initiative is more important than some of the other things that may have to be deferred to make room for this. And so I think part of the focus will have to be convincing them that this is money well spent and that this will save us. I think Mike said it nicely, some money today will save us a lot more money in the future. And I think that's part of that return on investment equation that we have to sort of have an open discussion with council and convince them that that this is money well spent. And I think that'll get a lot of sort of discussion on the table to convince them and get them to sort of start talking about the actual initiative themselves.
Thanks, Al. Danuta, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, something just popped into my head. We're talking about partnerships and public health. Do you think that Andrew, is it Barton, would be, or is it appropriate to have him attend this special meeting?
Well, I think that's a good question. He certainly attended the evening we had. What evening was it, Sue, that Andy was there? Or was that about that?
It was our team that presented a short of the film and talked about the film and more or less introduced ourselves as a group to the council. And it was last November.
Mm-hmm. Okay, could have been. Yeah, I'm not so.
No.
I guess I'm not so sure if now is the time to start bringing in. Given that we only have a week and a half, I'm not so sure that now is the time. But I think it's important to keep that for sure in mind as one of the first steps is to start forming those partnerships in the community. Other thoughts on that, Anne? Just on mute there, Anne, I think.
Sorry,
That's
I'm
okay.
not sure to bring someone else in that the committee is actually not that familiar with makes sense. I think bringing them in does make sense, but I think the timing is important. I really liked what Al was talking about in terms of needing to put kind of the benefits of doing this, the financial benefits of doing this, really clearly on the table for council. And I put down a quote that Mike made, in that he said that 100,000 for the plan could save millions down the road. That's a pretty powerful quote coming from a municipality that's not too far away. But I think it's that kind of dollars and cents stuff that I think is really important to be able to present to them.
I agree. John, I see your hand up.
Yeah, something that has been in the back of my mind, and listening to Al kind of provoked it. And I wonder if we have some data at hand from our own financial records that we could use to actually demonstrate sort of the cost and benefits of climate change. And the few things I'm thinking about is that presentation from Zach on the Energy Conservation Demand Management Program. And he showed how over the years that we've reduced the amount of energy we're using, and therefore there's been a cost saving to the municipalities as an example of becoming more efficient with our buildings and facilities. Another example, I've been reading that we're spending more on our roads now, our road maintenance, because of the increasing freeze-thaw cycles that we're experiencing. And I wonder if we have financial data on that would indicate that would support that observation, that we're actually spending more on roads now, and can link this back to climate change. And another obvious one is shoreline damage. Anybody that's got shoreline on Georgian Bay, I have a friend that works with Sutherland Construction, and they have a full-time crew now just trying to repair shorelines and roads that are caving in along the shores, and they're now taking appointments. I think it's in 2023. They're backed up this year and right into next. So I wonder if Cassandra might have some of these data, or might have been looked at in the past, that we could just bring to the table as our own example of both costs increasing, but in Zach's example of cost decreasing.
Yeah, I really like that, John, because it makes it real, and it talks about the local impacts, and it helps to sort of demystify why we need to do this, and also from an asset management perspective, and assigning reserve funds every year to deal with the impacts. So is that something, do you think, Al and Brittany, we might be able to access some data there for the presentation from staff?
Through you, Madam Chair, I can certainly explore. I'm hesitant to commit to that. I'm not sure the level of detail that we've been sort of tracking on this, but I will certainly ask the question, and we can certainly dig up Zach's presentation to illustrate some of the good things that we're doing and how it sort of moves us forward. But I'll certainly speak to Cass about that and to staff.
Thank you. And Sue, I did see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Just another thing that maybe should be brought forward is the fact that as we go ahead with looking to apply for grants and such, it's going to become important that we have a climate action plan in place, or we're not going to be eligible for some of these grants. So that might be a good point to kind of make with all of council as well.
Yeah, I think that's a key point for sure. Thank you for that reminder. Anne.
If I remember correctly, I think that Jen brought a report to, it may have been our first or second meeting, about the kinds of things that George and Bless was dealing with that she felt were attributed to climate change. And it was a nice kind of point form list that is already done. It wouldn't mean work for somebody.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I do recall that now too. Yep. Thank you. Other suggestions for that meeting or in preparation for the meeting? John, I'm not sure if your hand is newly raised or if that's from previous. Sorry, I wasn't keeping track. Okay. Any other, Sue?
Just a thought, if we're managing to pull all of these reports like Zach's and Jen's together, would those go out to all of council ahead of time as a package so that, okay, I see Brittany nodding her head. Excellent.
Yeah, that I think as much background information as we can provide without overwhelming, because if people see a package and there's 150 pages, sometimes they're tempted not to even open it. So yeah, it's important to have information, but not to overwhelm for sure. Other ideas or suggestions on this particular item on the agenda, or do we feel like we have a bit of a plan going forward? Yeah, okay, good. Good. All right, so under new business, we have also added an update from our CAO. If I could ask Al you to do that for us, and hopefully you have a bit of an update for us on discussions from West Grey. I believe their council has gone ahead and made a financial commitment as well, which is also good news. So I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just by way of update, so I have had some discussions with Laura, the West Grey CAO, and we are on the same page in terms of exploring opportunities, not only from a cost sharing perspective, but really challenging each other. Might be even a competition between ourselves to see what we can do. But there's a bunch of things that we've started to discuss. The bottom line is it was very optimistic, very encouraging discussion. We've agreed to meet again in the coming weeks. And what we also agreed is that we threw out a challenge to some of the other CAOs in the lower tier, including Kim at the county. And I can tell you the overwhelming response that I've gotten from all the CAOs is that they are more than interested in sitting down and really defining what this all looks like for all of our municipalities. We all know, and I think Councillor Coburn, you said this earlier, there isn't sort of boundaries or some mystical mechanism at the edge of our boundaries that stop climate change at our municipal boundaries. So there is a lot of benefit, in my opinion, working together and really sharing ideas from each other. And you know, if we are looking down the road at hiring a consultant to do some different planning, I think we can get some synergies by having 3 or 4 townships going out together with one RFP. And I would suspect the cost savings would be significant for all of us. We could also apply for grants together, things of that sort. So those are the types of things that we're exploring. But bottom line to report to this committee is the discussions were very encouraging, very optimistic. They're all thankful that we're taking the lead under this committee's mentorship and direction. And so they are looking forward to working with us And as I have additional meetings in the coming weeks, I will certainly share the agendas and provide continuous feedback to this committee and look for your continued direction on how we're going to proceed. So it's positive all around.
That is great news. Yeah, I think the momentum has begun, so that's super. And I do believe I heard that West Grey Council has added $50,000 in their budget for climate change. So that's a good trend for a neighbor to set as well for us moving forward. Yeah. Any questions for Al on that information, Anne?
Will that be shared with council at this joint meeting, the potential of partnerships and cost sharing? Good.
Through you, Madam Chair, I certainly will share it.
Super. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so moving on to just the last item under new business. I'm going to pick on you a little bit, John, if you don't mind. I know you and I and perhaps others attended the one of the webinars in the sustainability seminar series through Brock University. Was that just yesterday? I feel like it was longer ago than that, but
just yesterday, yeah.
Oh my goodness. So I know I made notes that I'm happy to share, but I think what would be probably more valuable, if you don't mind, is to just, would you feel comfortable covering some of the high points of that seminar? And you did have a great question at the end of it, so I thought that was useful as well.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to share my observations, and I actually shared these last night with the Climate Action Team Owen Sound, and we added it to the agenda, along with that drivers and barriers document that I circulated. They both go hand in hand, and they're both proving to be quite useful. So just for those of you that don't know, this was a seminar. It's part of the seminar series at Brock University, hosted by the Environmental Sustainability Research Center. And this panel of three is directly linked to the Niagara Adapts program, that is a collaborative program amongst 7 lower tier municipalities on the Niagara Peninsula. And present at this was Jacob Porter. He's in charge of the climate adaptation program for the city of Thunder Bay. Katie Thompson, she's the risk management official and business performance person at the city of Barrie. And Joanna Equim she's with the Intech Center for Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo, and she's currently working very closely with the City of Montreal on implementing their climate action plan. So those were the panelists, and they went through, the moderator, Dr. Blythe, went through a series of, what have you achieved and what are your successes, and then what are your problems and what have you run into? And I made notes throughout the whole thing, and I've kind of summarized that there were 2 main results that came out of this seminar series, and one was the importance of climate literacy. This is a major barrier to moving forward, and particularly amongst senior staff in councils and councillors themselves. And then as Joanna from U Waterloo says, you actually extend that into the community and your corporate sector and so on, so that climate literacy is an important thing. And the fellow from Thunder Bay said that they recognized that early on, and what they have is they have a training program for staff at Thunder Bay, so that they all go through a climate literacy training program. They have a climate champion on staff, a climate specialist, and any new staff, because staff turnover is an issue that all municipalities deal with. Katie from Barrie, she said not only have they had a bunch of retirees and staff turnover, but they did a complete reorganization after they'd actually done their climate action plan. So new staff coming in get that training right off the bat. So they don't really get going on their job until they have that training. And so what this does is leads to the second point that kept emerging, was the importance of what they use the term mainstreaming, the process of planning with climate. And it's the whole concept of a climate lens, and that this goes across your sectors within the municipality. And so those two are tightly linked and are felt to be really important solutions to moving forward on implementing a cap once you've got it. So that was kind of the take-home message for me.
Yeah, that's perfect. Am I ever glad you showed up when you did, John? Because that was a much better synopsis than I was probably prepared to give. So yeah, those were for sure the highlights.
And we could also add that panel discussion is on their website. So anyone that has the time and interest can go. We can give you the link that's on that poster, so that someone, anyone could go and listen to it. It goes for about an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly emphasize the importance of interdepartmental knowledge and information sharing. And Al's done a lot of work already in a short time with us to start breaking down those silos within our own staff at the municipality. And this is another one of those things that helps to break down the silos because it impacts every single department that we've got, from finance to the works department to planning and building and all of the rest of it. Any questions for John on that seminar, or doesn't look like it, but that was, oh, go ahead, Luke.
Well, you actually triggered, Kathy. What was the question, John, you asked towards the end?
Was the question that Kathy asked me or that I asked?
The question that Kathy mentioned was such a good question towards the end. Now that you that was an intriguing comment. So now I'm curious.
I believe it was around climate literacy, wasn't it, John? I took notes, and I think it was the response was this. I thought was really key, was that we need to focus on the audience's values. I call that dealing in their currency, but I like this better. Focusing on their values. So how does climate change impact their lives and their work? And I think that discussion was brought about by your question, John, around the whole literacy piece.
Yeah. So that in that barriers and drivers document, I did the summary of some of the key things. Another thing from that document that we might add, because we've discussed this a little bit in our last meeting, they point out the importance of having the whole concept of planning through a climate lens in your official plan, and that this is an important step for a municipality in going forward with that 20-year vision. So there's many lessons learned, and climate literacy continues to be, right up there as an important issue. Once you understand what we're dealing with, if you had a conversation, if I had a conversation when I was at university about whether smoking harmed your health or caused cancer, there could have been some really big debates, especially in the pub. You don't have those conversations anymore because we've become tobacco cancer literate. And that's the kind of transition that's going to happen and is happening once you understand what we're dealing with. Once you understand smoking causes cancer and heart and stroke disease, a lot fewer people smoke and a lot more people are willing to say if someone put it out. So it's the same concept and the same path we're going down. And that's why I think the literacy is so important.
Yeah, I agree. One of the speakers in the seminar brought it back to the change theory model, and I know I've spoken of that in the past as well. It's moving people along that continuum of understanding and believing the science, and that's going to be a work in progress for sure. All right. Anne, question or comment?
Actually, just to go on to that conversation and that question, is there a question that comes out of that could be shared with the council members that Brittany is putting together?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think it was you, Anne, that suggested we should ask, how do you feel about adaptation and mitigation? But that presupposes that that they understand what those words and terms mean. And honestly, I'm still new at a lot of this, and some of the terminology that we get hit with, I have to look up still. So I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So we don't want to assume that people have the lingo that we use and are more comfortable with. So yeah, I think that's a good question. How do we phrase that? I'm a little hesitant to use the term literacy, because it might have some negative connotation. But we do want to get at, where do you feel you are in your understanding of climate science? And, is that an area where you would need more information from us? Is that what you're getting at, Anne?
Yeah, and I liked what you had I liked what you had mentioned in terms of the values and how is it impacting your life and your work, because that brings it home, and there's no kind of sciencey words or nothing. It's just how's it affecting you? What do you think about it? Those.
Yeah, what are the real impacts on your life and your work that you've noticed? Yeah. So I think Brittany's likely in the background capturing those kinds of things for questions moving forward. Either that or she's still trying to eat her yogurt for lunch.
Well, or control her cat.
I thought that was a feather duster.
Yeah.
The cat's tail. Okay, yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thank you, Anne. Anything else before we move away from new business? And I think I captured everything, Brittany, have I, that fell under new business? Okay, excellent. Let's move on then. I don't believe that, or I guess I should ask, does anyone have any notice of motion going forward? We have nothing under closed session. And could we take a few minutes to determine the date of our next regular meeting? Or, yeah, I suppose we should do that, right? We don't have anything booked other than the 24th.
What do we think about the 26th to meet and debrief about the council meeting?
That date works for me. Anybody else? And mornings, would we go back to 10 o'clock for that one, Brittany?
Mr. CAO, not to put you on the spot, but would we go back to mornings?
For that particular day, I can do 10 a.m. on the 26th of March.
Does that work for everybody? I'm seeing heads nodding. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Excellent. And I have now proceeded to put it under 3 o'clock for some reason. 10. All right, got it. Great. So Friday, March 26th at 10 a.m. And we can do a debrief on the presentation to council as a main agenda item, and any other agenda items that you have, just forward on to either Brittany or me or Anne. And unless there's anything else, I would just ask for a motion to adjourn. And thank you, and all those in favor. And that carries. Thanks, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend.
Great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks. Goodbye.